Paris is slowly succumbing to the influence of a star sapphire once more, and yet he's developing feelings for another woman. And so he knows that he has to be there for Carol, both as Hal and Green Lantern, but there's also this other woman who he cares about. But it just shows how important Barry is to him that he says, well, I have to drop everything else and go after this man. The battle also serves to show us just how powerful Barry really was, as Hal is wielding the most powerful weapon in the world, and Barry is able to break Hal's constructs pretty easily. We also see that Barry is resentful that Hal has, in his mind, forgotten their friendship, as Barry reminds Hal that he has the power to defeat a Green Lantern and a Green Lantern's ring. And once again, Hal's involvement here also sets up future events at the end of this story arc. So diving back into Volume 2 of The Flash, issue number 77, which serves as part 4, so just past the midway point of this storyline, Wally has hit rock bottom. It looks like he has holed himself up at home for days, and he tells the reader that the only person he has contacted to let them know he is alive is Linda. And at this point, it looks like he is finished with being the Flash, and he has no idea what to do. We see the new team of Jay, Johnny, and Max all in costume and all confronting Barry at a construction site. I do want to take a bit of time here to comment on Jay and Barry's pre-crisis relationship. Of course, it was the classic Flash of Two Earths story which introduced the concept of the multiverse. It was the first time that Jay and Barry teamed up with each other. And it's hard to talk about their post-crisis relationship because outside of the odd flashback story in the Copper Age, to be more specific, we didn't really get to see much of how their relationship was like in the post-crisis reality. Certainly in the pre-crisis era, we saw that they were very good friends. I wouldn't say that Jay saw himself as a mentor. I don't think Barry saw himself as a mentor, since they were both from separate Earths, and they were both the first person of their respective Earths to take the title of Flash. They saw themselves on the same level. They could certainly compare their powers, maybe share tips back and forth. At the time of Zero Hour, it was clear from Jay's dialogue that he viewed Barry as the son that he was never able to have. But going here to 1992, or rather 1993, I think we can say at least that the pre-crisis relationship really transferred over to the post-crisis era. And so seeing Barry acting the way he is in the story arc must certainly have been hard for Jay to witness. And we see that Jay still cares very much for Barry, as he reminds the other speedsters that Barry has lost his senses and is not a well man. Now, witnessing Barry's actions is certainly hard enough for Jay, but the subsequent beating of Jay by Barry must have been a terrible trauma for him. Again, I go back to Zero Hour, issue number 3, 1995, where Jay said that he saw Barry as a son. And this would certainly be very difficult for longtime readers to witness, given their memory of all those great Earth 1, 2 stories in which Jay, Barry, and even Wally all enjoyed joint adventures. As for Wally, he actually does get the wherewithal to get dressed and go out and do some investigating. He goes back to the alley that Barry says was the site of his resurrection. Wally recalls Barry saying that he had accidentally left something in the alley which could help him remember everything. A drifter has picked up the item, which is a memoir of Barry Allen. Wally gets the memoir for a cool $20 and proceeds to read the tattered book's contents. And there are 2 words in the inside cover which provide a massive revelation that inspires Wally to become the Flash again and bring down Barry Allen. Book 2 by Mark Waid includes a Bloodlines annual. It's a completely separate, standalone story that introduces the character Argus. However, it does reference Wally's search for Barry, and it establishes that it's taking days for Wally to find Barry. Presumably, Barry is alternately popping up, creating havoc, and then lying low. And given that the prologue took place on Christmas Eve, it's clear to see that several weeks have passed at this point. It's been established in dialogue in the previous 4 parts, but we can see the snow is gone. It's clearly spring at this point, maybe even heading towards summer. All right, we get back into The Flash, number 78. This is the penultimate part of Return of Barry Allen. And we see Wally being prepped for his impending showdown with Barry by Johnny, Max, and Jay. Now, Johnny is trying to teach Wally the speed formula he uses to access his speed powers, and Wally isn't having any of it, and Max supports him. It's interesting to see that Max sees Johnny's formula as a sham. I don't think that we should entirely dismiss Johnny's words here. It's important to keep in mind that in 1993, the concept of the Speed Force had not yet been introduced. And yet, here, a little over a year, maybe even closer to 2 years, time in which Wally becomes the first to discover the existence of the Speed Force, Johnny is talking about accessing certain power source that exists in 4 dimensions, and the mathematical formula he uses to access his speed powers is a way of him focusing on accessing this 4-dimensional phenomenon. And I remember reading this part and thinking, oh, maybe it's Johnny Quick who should be credited with discovering the Speed Force, even though he wasn't able to give it a name, even though he wasn't able to interact with it. It certainly sounds like he's talking about the Speed Force here. It'd just be interesting to know if off panel at some point Johnny went back to Max and said, maybe you want to eat some crow and admit that I was kind of on the right track back at this time. In any event, Max instructs Wally in listening to and thinking about and feeling his powers. And Wally doesn't really want to get wrapped up in Zen mysticism, but Max makes a very important statement that speaks to the nature of Wally's current power set. Max says that Wally's reduced speed is not due to his being blasted by the Anti-Monitor at the end of Crisis. Rather, it is because of his fear of replacing Barry that he does not run as fast as his fallen mentor. Max says that Wally does not want to replace Barry, but once this happens, Max says that Wally does not want to replace Barry, but once Wally attains his top speed, he will have done just that. This is so important because this is an element that Mark Waid would certainly expand upon going forward. Certainly Jeff Johns and other writers would bring up this idea that it wasn't being blasted by the Anti-Monitor at the end of Crisis that reduced Wally's speed. Rather, it was a mental block that he had in place, stemming from his fear of completely replacing Barry, that reduced his speed, and so it was just easier for him to rationalize that being blasted by the Anti-Monitor caused this permanent reduction of his speed. Now, Wally asks Jay for his advice, and Jay replies that there are elements of Max's teaching that not even Jay knows, and that he has nothing more than he can pass on to Wally. Jay says, "All I can give you is my faith, Flash." Wally is surprised that Jay did not call him Junior as he usually does, and Jay replies that he calls people by their names, and Wally has earned his name. At this time, I want to say that Jay Garrick was still going by the title of Flash, but certainly at the end of the 90s, going into the 2000s, with Jeff Johns' run on JSA, Jay would eventually move past the title of Flash, and he would actually ask people to call him either Jay or Mr. Garrick rather than Flash. But I want to say at this time, Jay still took the title of Flash. And so really important here, a sign of Wally's development, that now the original Flash is recognizing him with the name. And we see Wally finally stepping up as a leader as he tells the three elder statesmen to get Barry to the Flash Museum while Wally gets things set up there. As Wally uses the knowledge he gained from the memoir, Jay, Johnny, and Max stop Barry from engineering a prison breakout. Barry snaps Jay's leg and races to the museum, where Wally presents Barry with a different ring that ejects a primarily yellow and red Flash costume. When Wally asks if he remembers who he really is, Barry responds in the affirmative and puts on this reverse-colored costume. While he's doing so, Wally reveals that the name inside the memoir was that of its owner, Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash. And this leads us into Flash number 79, the triple-sized conclusion to the storyline. The opening splash page shows Reverse Flash lunging towards Wally and the reader in an awesome nod to Carmine Infantino. I mean, there's enough of LaRock in the splash page, but we can see that LaRock must have gone back and looked at a number of issues penciled by Carmine Infantino, particularly issues which featured the Reverse Flash, who first appeared all the way back in the Flash number 139 that had a cover date of September 1963. Now, as Wally is fighting with Thawne, he says, of course, you must have come back just before things ended to try to get to me and to try to get to Barry. And Thawne drops a major revelation. He says he has never even met Barry Allen. In other words, this is a Reverse Flash who is just embarking on his criminal career. And at this point in the story, it does come across as a little confusing to the reader as it conflicts with Thawne's Silver Age origin. And for those of you who have not read Menace of the Reverse Flash from 1963, it's a great Silver Age story where the people of Central City are preparing a time capsule that's going to be buried and opened by people an untold number of years into the future. And so the Flash, Barry, donates one of his spare Flash costumes to the time capsule. and then we skip ahead to the 25th century, where small-time petty